Hello everyone, this is Milos Djordjevic and I'll be presenting Turning Data into Sound with Hannah Davis. So a little bit about Hannah Davis. Hannah Davis is a programmer and generative musician. Her work falls along the lines of music generation, which is a type of data sonification, artificial intelligence, and sentiment analysis. For a few years now, she has been working on a algorithm called transprose, which basically identifies emotions in a piece of text and translates it into a musical piece with a similar emotional tone. A human computer collaboration where she analyzed the sentiment of articles talking about technology over time was recently performed by an orchestra at the Louvre. Hannah is currently working on creating unique datasets for art and machine learning, and is also working on a project to generatively score films. Through her work on emotions in artificial intelligence, she's become particularly interested in the idea of subjective data, and she has recently started further research into this area. She's also 2017 Artificial Intelligence Grant recipient, which is given to brilliant minds in the area of artificial intelligence. In the podcast, the first thing they talk about is the type of sonification. Hannah says there are generally three types of sonification. The first and most simple one is audification, which basically means directly converting data to sound, interpreting the data as amplitude over time, basically like waves. This is the most simple one. Next one is perimeter mapping, which basically is mapping a value of the data to the component of the sound. Now, this is also something that has been done in the data visualization, but now we're doing it with the sound. Lastly, we have music generation. This is the area where Hannah is mostly interested. It's similar to perimeter mapping, but the focus is not on showing the data as much as creating interesting music. So she's using the data, and she's using the statistical analysis to create some interesting music, to create new pieces of music. Another thing that she talks about is her part in composing for the laptop orchestra. That's her Percival piece. Basically, what she did was she used computers to that created the underlying track where each note is mapped into each word. There were, I believe she said there were 7 laptops, and each laptop added one additional component. And input for this performance was the text piece. They also played the performance, a part of the performance in that podcast, and it was really beautiful. She also gave a couple tips for beginners. As I mentioned in my previous slide, the first tip she gave was avoid audification. If you're starting, you should avoid audification because audification is fairly simple, and because of that, it's fairly limiting. So it's gonna limit your it's gonna limit what you can do because it's very literal. Next tip she had was thinking carefully about your mapping, because once you understand and once you know what you're gonna map, you gotta think carefully. For example, some tones might, if you take some tones for the lower temperature, let's say your data set is the temperatures during the day, and if you set notes for the lower temperatures, low notes, your music might be fairly sad. If that's not your goal, then you should pick a different data or something along those lines. Lastly, but not least, getting basic statistics about your data is also very important, because once you get your data, and once you're fairly comfortable with your data and statistics, you'll be much you'll be getting your pieces easier, and you'll start making music much easier. Something that I enjoyed and something that I learned while listening was that graphing data can be done through sound, and instead of representing it through traditional graphical properties, now we are using sound as representation of data, and that's something very interesting. And uh, I'm looking forward to seeing where this can lead. Another thing is possible new music genre. As I was talking, Hannah is really interested in music generation, which is the type of sonification. And with this, she is creating music pieces that are just beautiful, and they deserve to have their own unique genre in the music industry. Third one is that with sound, you can have better data understanding. So if you represent data with sound, sometimes you might get better interpretation of the data. For example, they gave one example in the podcast where they represented the data of ski racers, I believe. So time when the first one passed, and then second one and third and so on, they represented with the music sound, and then they played it. So in that piece right there, you can better understand how close to each other they were, racers I mean. Instead of just looking at the plain numbers and graphs, now you can involve your hearing and understand better. And that will be all. Thank you for your attention.